Well, we're at that time where the General Assembly is starting to wind down, but not just yet. There are a lot of important bills that are still up for grabs. Today we have with us Delegate Jackie Glass, representing the 89th District, to tell us exactly what's going on. It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and this is our annual 2023 General Assembly Legislative Review. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We're so thankful to have you here listening as you always do and support this very important show, State of the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. As always, we're broadcasting live from the campus of the Norfolk State University, the largest, biggest, and baddest HBCU in the land. And of course, the number one band in the land by rankings as well. So we're excited about the band and excited for the things that they've accomplished. We're also broadcasting from WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. And in studio with us, we have our producer, the hardest working man in radio, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous, which you can hear on air every day, Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 p.m. Saturday, he's broadcasting as well and broadcasting the games that you hear. And, of course, he's in studio live with me today, Sunday. So, like I said, we appreciate him, the hardest working man in radio. Look, we do this General Assembly review every year because, as promised, what I want to do is bring the policymakers, the movers and shakers to you to discuss important issues that are in your community and that are important to you. So we've had several various delegates on the show and legislators throughout this month of January and February. And today we have with us a very good friend of mine and also the state delegate that represents Norfolk State University. We sit right in that district, 89th District. We have with us on air right now, Delegate Jackie Glass. Delegate Glass, welcome to Stay in the Water.
Thank you, Dr. Claville. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Look, I tell everybody, my producer, the hardest working man in radio, but I think when we talk about the hardest working delegate in their community, as a mom, Navy veteran, and a certified doer, you probably rank up there. You probably rank right up there with the hardest working delegate here in Hampton Roads. So
I appreciate you. I think we all come to the table with our best.
Absolutely.
People deserve it.
Absolutely. I think about when we first met and as I got to know you, you weren't in politics, but you were grassroots. I mean, you were on the ground, door to door, knocking, organizing, saying, hey, we could change the world, And, and we had that affinity because as I stated, and I started out as a community organizer in college as well. And I still believe that it's all about the people and the community. And that is really a building block of your representation.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about right now, we're in the General Assembly. It's a short session. What's going on with Delegate Glass in the 89th District?
Well, yeah, we're on the tail end of this. I think we have a week left. Just one whole week left up there in Richmond, and then it's back home until we reconvene. Just for educational purposes, we're for folks out there. Like, we've pretty much gone through all of our legislation, right? Some of our legislation is over in the Senate getting worked on. Some of their legislation is over in the House getting worked on, and we'll sort of work out the things that we disagree on. But I think the biggest piece for us here right now is to understand we are in the process of negotiating a budget, and will be for quite a bit of time. And I've had some good legislation come through. It's a challenge. I think it's a good challenge right now, having checks and balances. Both chambers being ruled by a different hand. So we've got good stuff coming through, right? What I'm disappointed about, I'll say, is that some of the things that I think I wanted most of, I don't want the police lying to children, talking a lot about kids, didn't get those sorts of things through. But we've seen, I think, some good progress. But I need people to really hone in on this budget piece, because it's going to take a lot of advocacy, I think, from the people on this one, because the budget is ultimately about our choices, right? Each of us as legislators come to the table with our decision making, but this budget is about choices. And if I'm looking at the kinds of choices that we've seen, at least on our side on the House side, the budget that's coming out of the House, which I'll just say already, we pulled some things out of it I voted for, but overall I voted against the budget because it was not working to lower costs. I know people keep talking about eggs, but that's a real life thing for me right now, right? When I go and I see it's $7, that's a trip.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There's ways that we can actually make budget choices, whether it's on housing, medicine, energy, to put money back in people's pockets in different kinds of ways. And this is a learning curve for me, Dr. Claville. I think this summer we spent time just digging into how to read the money, right? So that I can educate folks on how to read the money so that we can get some of the things we need. But foundationally, there's a lot of tax cuts in there. I don't even know if people understand what happens is when we give folks tax cuts, our money pays for other things.
Right.
So I'm just going to put it plain and simple. If I say, it's going to cost you $2.50, and I take $1 off of that and decide that I'm going to give it to your neighbor, right? And that $2.50 paid for the streets to be fixed. Now we only have $1 to make things happen. So that money has to come from everywhere, and everyone has a vested interest in sort of paying attention to what's happening with our budget right now, Dr. Claville.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned the tax cuts, because I talked to Delegate Cliff Hayes, and I asked him the same question. I said, listen, the governor proposed, $1 billion in tax cuts, but also proposed another $1 billion in spending. So the question becomes, actually, I think it was $2 billion in spending. The question becomes, where does that money come from?
Where does it come from? You know what? And this is the issue that I see is we keep talking about a surplus, right? And a lot of the surplus that we're seeing in places is indicators of problems. We have surplus in the medical examiner budget because we don't have investigators. We have surplus in the education, but in the policing budget because we don't have officers. That's indicators of a problem, not an opportunity to spend more. And I think, and I know that that's what's happening on some of this. I am certainly amenable to talking and meeting with anybody that'll have an amicable conversation about how we take steps forward. But what I've seen is I've talked to the policies office at the executive level and straight asked, hey, are you saying that this money, because we don't have the human capital, is a surplus and spend it in other places rather than finding in ways to, one, invest in the people that we have to keep them here, or two, make a way to bring folks here? And they're like, I wouldn't say that. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what's happening. So that's what we see. And we try to be clever, Dr. Claville, on our end and say, hey, when there's a surplus in a particular area, when I say surplus and there's money left over, can we commit that money to reinvest back into that particular program area that's missing? And they said, this is clever. Local governments do it all the time, right? They do it all the time when we have extra money. We'll just put that extra money aside to build for this other project. We'll hold it, but it still is an opportunity to be of service to the people. It's a difference of values. And so that money, where it's coming from, it's not addressing the problems. It's a means, at least I'm seeing it's a means to tout some things that don't directly impact our people, like, fundamentally some economic freedom for hardworking folks. It's hard, and that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Absolutely. It's Save the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and with us we have Delegate Jackie Glass representing the 89th District here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where Norfolk State University sits squarely in that district. This is our annual General Assembly review where we talk with legislators about what's going on and the updates on their legislation as it moves through our state's capital here in Richmond. Delegate Glass, you mentioned that, you're still pushing and learning the ins and outs here. I remember we talked last, of course, you came into a seat that was not expired at the time you got in. And I said, as long as you know how to find the restrooms in your office and get back to it, you're good for your first session. So, we take it that you've been able to do that, but also being able to understand how the laws actually work, introduce, file, go through subcommittee, committee, and then the changes and so forth. You've had a lot of, I've taken a look at your legislative priorities and the bills that you put up. And for those of you that are listening, you can go to delegatejackieGlass.com. That's delegatejackieGlass.com and see these bills. I mean, these were some very forward-thinking bills that were put up by Delegate Glass and definitely impacted community on the ground. But it looks like the House killed, if not all the bills, quite a few of them.
Yeah, they killed all but two. I'd like to think that the legislation that we bring forth are solving real problems, Dr. Claville.
Yes.
We're trying to figure out how do we solve real problems. And sometimes I find that in trying to solve problems, it's not a legislative thing; it's other items. So something like, hey, when the police officers or when they are able to take your assets, that they notify you that you're not guilty, you notify you that you have the right to get them back, because we've had departments ending up with millions and one had up to $11 million in people's forfeited assets for folks that were proven not guilty. Now, I've learned a lot more about what that means, not guilty. Sometimes people don't want their assets back, but just putting people on notice, or something like saying we're not going to make promises to young people in interrogations that we can't keep to get a false confession. We're not going to lie to them because we're going to treat them as young people. What I found is that we want to treat in our chambers, that we want to treat young people like they're ignorant when it comes to education, but like they're adults when it comes to criminal justice.
Wow.
And it's just substandard. Wow. We try to get rid of fake documents again. I was that got killed. We did some guardian ad litem things that were successful. One thing that I think is really great that we did get through is our victim compensation fund. And for those that don't know, is when you're a victim of a crime in the Commonwealth through no fault of your own, there is a fund at the state level to support you with medical costs, or sometimes with funeral costs. It's to help you because it's no fault of your own. However, the contingency of you being able to get that money requires that you cooperate with police. Now, I think we may have talked about this last year, that we don't have a funded witness protection program. It's been around since 1995. We never invested money into it. And so what happens when I, as a person, I'll just put center me here. If I, as a person, say, I've been a victim of a crime, I want to cooperate with police, but my life is in danger, and the police say, well, we can't protect you, I don't get access to that compensation. And so we fixed the law to say, if the police say that if they cannot protect you, and they're able to say that they cannot protect you and there's a credible threat to your life, that you still get that help, because we shouldn't punish for our substandard decision-making, right, or our lack of investment in a much-needed program. Now, we'll say that there is money in the budget right now, I believe on the House side, for the witness protection program to fund it for the first time since 1995, since its inception, which is a good thing. But that's the kinds of things that we're trying to do. Protect people from solar predators. That was killed. I think there was an audible gasp, Dr. Claville, when that bill was killed, because we had someone come up and say, the Attorney General's office is reaching out to us, asking us for help on how to deal with these people, putting folks in predatory contracts with putting solar on their house. All we wanted to do is get the smartest people that we know in the room with some of our state level folks to figure out what the issues are so that we can take next steps. And it died. And it was killed. And to be quite honest with you, we sat in silence for a good 10 seconds because no one wanted to kill the bill. But the unfortunate thing is sometimes there's a list out there of what's going to be killed and what's not. Yeah. And being that we're rolling into an election year, there was a lot of making sure people don't get things done. But what I will say, Dr. Claville, is that what I found with some of this legislation is we found ways forward without having to make a law. And so over this summer, we pulled folks in agencies, we pulled the best folks together to already have work groups on the table to do the exact same things that we wanted to do legislatively. And we're just going to have to work with these departments to make it happen, because I don't think we should allow someone telling us no to not creatively think about ways to move forward, because it's people's real lives that we're talking about. So it's just a get it done, son attitude. Like, I feel like even though they've killed the majority of our bills, there's still a way to make some things happen.
Absolutely. And again, that's one example of how, government works. There's more than one way, to get things done. And it's about building those coalitions. And you mentioned something very important when you say building those coalitions. I don't think a lot of people understand that when something comes up as an idea in a pre-file, well, first of all, as an idea before it becomes a pre-file bill, you got to get support, to rally around that. For when I say that you're probably one of the hardest working delegates out there as a certified doer, you've got it when you're talking about community efforts and bills for the community. That's a harder push than the business community, because they've already got their mechanism in place. They've been doing this a very long time. So when you talk about these bills that you put up to help the community, again, these predatory solar contracts, people trying to do the right thing for clean energy, but they get looped into these contracts that are basically setting them up for failure for a lifetime.
Absolutely. Folks can't sell their houses. Dr. Claville?
Yeah.
People are having issues with just selling their houses because of the solar on there.
Wow.
The contractor. But to your point, I think the most heartwarming and the bill that probably touched my heart the most, and to see us as Black folks in the Capitol, was the creative. I put forth a bill to have a creative economy grant fund for, creative entrepreneurs or independent content creators, really trying to build that economy. And we did a lobby day, and folks just showed up. Some folks from Hampton Roads got on a whole bus and came up there, and you could see, and I'm just saying that it was particularly the Black community. I mean, just all these Black faces walking around the General Assembly, and people were just like, what? I mean, it was the most beautiful thing that I felt like I was overwhelmed with the opportunity of people want to be seen. And we ingest people's creativity all the time, whether it's through social media, whether it's the radio or it's on TV. And that's a real boost if we invest in it. I think for every $1, the study is for every $1 we put in our creative economy, we get $7 back, because we all want to be entertained, right? I think back to the Spartan days. Are you entertained, right? In the Coliseum. Like, we all want that in some way, shape, or form. And so that bill, I had a former governor write a letter of support out of nowhere for the bill and call me up and say, hey, let's figure out how to make this happen, because it's a viable industry and we need to support. And I think specifically Black creatives stand to gain so much from the investment in the creative economy. So when I see a whole community feel, and it didn't pass, but if I understood what happened in the moment, is that people felt seen. And when they felt seen, they showed up. And now that they showed up, they're like, so what, now what? And let's do what's next. And that's what I hope for with the types of things that we bring forward, that people feel seen, heard, valued, and then can see how they are participatory in the process, because I can't do it all.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, that was one of the bills I wanted to bring up, that with the criminal compensation, and then the Virginia Creative Economy Grant Fund and Program. That's HB House Bill 2376. That's HB 2376. And what this bill does, it establishes the Virginia Creative Economy Grant Fund, the Virginia Creative Economy Grant Fund, in order to provide independent content creators and entrepreneurs for the purpose of developing and expanding the creative economy in Virginia. It provides an award of grants of no more than $20,000 per recipient. $20,000. Now, again, everyone out there that's listening, this was one of those innovative bills that the delegate put up that received the tremendous amount of support that she's talking about, where people just caravan here from Hampton Roads up there to support through the halls of the government lobbying for it, letter by former governor supporting it. And this is a bill where you talk about, we talked about the governor wanting to give $1 billion in tax cuts, $2 billion in extra spending and so forth. But $20,000, right? $20,000. That may not seem a lot to someone who has millions or to a company that's working in hundreds of millions of dollars. But $20,000 for an independent, for a small business, for somebody who has an idea to say, hey, I just need an opportunity. That is a lifeline. Yeah.
Dr. Claville, it's something that we do for farmers. It's something that we do for tech industry, right? You say innovative, but I just looked at economic development and said, what is economic development doing for other sectors? And why can't we do it for this one, especially when we all ingest it? So, I want folks to stop seeing this as just giving grants to do murals or giving see this as an economic driver. And I got a lot of pushback on asking the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. But I was like, look, I'm not thinking of this any other way other than economic development. And there's also infrastructure side of it, right, where if we had sound studios in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we could build video games here. We can do so many different things and so much more. And so I see it twofold is if we can get the independent folks off the ground and running and become businesses, right? Become actual small businesses where we respect their intellectual capital and their creative capital to where it puts dollars into their pocket and they become tax business owners and they put dollars into our economy. And it's a circular thing here, right? It's just the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do.
It is. It takes time, right? And I think I was lobbying a bill last year, and it was a Republican senator, and he was looking at the stuff I had. He said, these are good ideas. He said, they're going to take you some time. He said, I just want to let you know. I feel like I've had some really amazing ideas, and it's taken me 5 years to get them done. He said, but if it's a good idea, it's worth that time. So just put it in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's good to get that encouragement from the other side, too. You know what I'm saying? Because it's good
to get it anyway. Because I'm like you said, I didn't come up in party politics. I did, I feel like I'm now doing party politics, doing policy better for people. And so when I feel like maybe I'm drowning a little bit or I'm frustrated at the time where I just want to cry because of the process or because of the way people sit in the process, I remember those moments where they say, like, all right, this is going to take time. Or I remember a moment when the most senior delegate in the House says, hey, Glass, you're a free agent, okay? So don't you let people try to pull you, or you know what you need to do. You're a free agent. And I hear that. So those things are really, I think it's healthy, emotionally healthy, because some days are really hard here just to see the devaluing and underestimation of people in this process, or just forgetting them altogether. It's frustrating. But I'm encouraged by the spirit of people and some of my colleagues as well.
Absolutely. The other part, well, first of all, you talk about being a free agent. One thing we know about sports, being a free agent is what everybody really wants, because you're able to dictate your own terms, for the best opportunity and outcome. And I think that designation fits you perfectly where, with your background, of course, the district you represent, you have the ability to dictate your own terms to really benefit the people that need it the most,
Thank you, Dr. Claville. I received that.
Absolutely. There's one more bill I want to talk about before we end, and that's the one from privileges and elections. That's HB 2308 to conduct elections from the Electoral Board. Now, I talked with Delegate Hayes about how there's been a major attack on elections and voting, right? Yeah. And there's still an attack, and how under the former administration there was a major push to expand voting. But what your bill was looking to do, and it was killed as well, it looked to allow local electoral boards that meet to ascertain the voting count for mail-in ballots to adjourn as needed, as opposed to the 7-day mandate. In other words, you allow them to make sure that they make the right decision for themselves, because some localities are bigger than others. And it takes time to, count the ballots to make sure that every vote counts. But that bill was killed, Give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on that.
That's one of those moments where you're like, it's super frustrating, because the rationale for that bill came from the registrar. But actually, the Norfolk registrar, she reached out at the ninth hour, was like, hey, we need this, because what happens when Veterans Day falls on a holiday, during the week, and then that day still counts against us, and we're up against a wall trying to get get the ballot certified to certify the election. So, we need that time. And the counterpoint to the other side, it was, well, let's take more responsibilities away from them. Then we won't need more time. So, when you see the word integrity thrown around, and then it being used so loosely, right? Like that, it has become a relative word. It's only integrity when it's on your side. That's frustrating, because I want to do what's right for everyone. I want everybody to feel like we have safe, secure elections, which we do. But I also understand that there's people on the other side of making that happen, right? There's people working day in and day out. When you talk, and I think about my special election, right? That people worked over Christmas.
That's right.
to make this happen. There's people behind that. And so if we give them the breath and the space to do what it is that they need to do, we're doing the right thing. And that's ultimately why it was killed. It's, again, back to having people in seats on these committees. I'm in the minority. Yeah. And there are not as many people that share the values that I do sitting in those committees to get them out of there. But it certainly was one of those things where it was good for everybody, no matter what party you're in, no matter what your affiliation is. It's good to make sure that these folks can do their job and they can do it well, and that we're not putting them under the gun. And so to scapegoat the process, right, to say, well, we just need to change the process to make it less accessible, it elicits open hand slap sort Absolutely. Of response from me. No joke. I hate to say that. In my head, I'm just like, what are you thinking? You want less people to vote, but that's, again, a difference in a value.
Absolutely. Delegate Glass, look, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and it's always an honor to have you on the show, because you bring such energy and such unique and needed perspective to the constituents and what you do. So, look, get some rest. You got one more week. And of course, I'll see you up there next week as well. So thank you again for all that you do.
Gratitude. Thank you for creating a space for this, Dr. Claville. It's so needed.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, once again, as we bring movers and shakers and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community, that's what Stay in the Water is all about. Join us every Sunday at 10 o'clock as we continue these important conversations. As always, be good, be great, and God bless. We'll see you next week.